Hi, I'm Lachlan Wilmot and the co-owner here of Athletes Authority. Hi, I'm Lachie Wilmot and I'm the co-owner of Athletes Authority. Today we're going to talk about the push band and its application around velocity-based training, but the practical application in programming and how we use it with all of our athletes and how we use it in our programming structures here at Athletes Authority. Now, there's a plethora of videos and blogs and information about the force velocity curve, how it functions, how we can apply it to velocity-based training and how we can use our athletes with it and everything. Today, I'm not going to go through that because there's plenty of stuff out there. In fact, there's a great blog that you can click on below that's on the Push website. It's a really good read around it and explains it very simply and how to apply it. What we're going to do today is actually look at the practical application and how us as coaches use it here and how we actually use it with our athletes to get some results. So there's four main programming options that we use. The first one we do is we use it as a bit of a measure on where they're at and where our athletes are that day. So we want to make sure that our athletes' 1RM is accurate based off how they're feeling that day, whether they're fatigued or recovered. So we use a bit of a warm-up protocol that'll get 3 main lifts in their warm-up and we'll keep that consistent. So let's say, for example, it's a bench press. We'll hit them with 20 kilos, 40 kilos, 60 kilos each time just for 5 reps, and we'll measure their velocity as they start to build up. From that, we can start to derive a bit of a regressive algorithm and work out where their 1RM is going to be for that day. And it's a really good indicator for us for key lifts, how our athletes are going to go that day and what we're going to program for them. So if it means their 1RM bench press is sitting around 120 kilos, normally that's great, but that day they might be fatigued, they might have had a big game, whatever it might be, and they've dropped off. So if their velocity is down, that will reiterate for us that we have to change that 1RM. So we'll use that regressive equation, we'll see what the velocity drop off is, and then we will modify it. And perhaps it might drop to 110 kilos for their 1RM, and that's what we'll chase that day. Now, if we're chasing a 1RM that day, then it's probably a bad indicator. We may change that, but what we will do is use the 3, 4, or 5 RM and just recalculate them for their training loads. The second method we use in programming is basically giving the coach the freedom and ability to know when to up or when to pull back on specific lifts. So there's some well-documented research around failing velocities. Now, a squat somewhere around that 0.3 meters a second, bench press around that 0.15 meters a second. So as a coach, when we know that that's a failing velocity, we can start to really be educated when we're looking at the velocities of our athletes and knowing when we can add a little bit more. So for example, if Brendo's on a squat, he's maybe hitting 4 reps. On that 4th rep, he's hitting maybe 0.39, 0.4. I can look at it and go, you know what? I might add a little bit more weight to him. I might add that extra 2.5 kilos. And then the next set rolls around. He has the extra 2.5. He hits out those 4 reps. That 4th rep's now more 0.32. As a coach, I know I'm smack bang where I want him to be. But if he's not working to failure, perhaps I want to keep him at that 0.4. So I think as a coach, we all have that eye. And as we get more experienced, we get better with our coach's eye. But when we're starting out, we really need to have some feedback, not only for the athlete, but also for the coach. And it gives us that confidence to say, you know what, Brendo, we're going to add another 2.5 kilos. Third option that we use when it comes to programming and how we can implement it in a team setting or just with individual athletes is to put the onus back on the athlete. So what we sometimes do is prescribe a specific speed for a specific exercise. So for example, if we're using, say, a squat jump, we'll say all we need is to keep it above 1 meter a second. Now, if that's what we're targeting, we'll allow the athletes to start to load up. As soon as they drop below 1 meter a second, we know they've gone too far. So we encourage them to try and get as much weight as we can, but we still want to maintain that speed. So with it, it might be 3, 4, even 5 reps sometimes, and there's just that single velocity that they have to hit every time, and it's up to them to start to load up. It's a really good way to sort of empower the athlete to just chase things, and it adds a bit of competition as well. Especially when there's a group of athletes moving around, they all have the same velocity they want to hit, so they're always challenging, trying to add a little bit more weight. Now, with this, we need to make sure it still looks good. There's no point just chasing velocity if the actual movement looks terrible. So it's really important as a coach that you've still got your coach's eye on it. But it is a great way that we can start to instill a bit of competition into the group. And our fourth option that we start to do with a little bit more onus on the athlete again, we don't necessarily prescribe reps, we will just prescribe the velocity, and they have to maintain that velocity for as long as they can. It's a really good way, again, to add competition, see who can get an extra rep out at that velocity, but it's also really good for more endurance events where we're trying to have that aerobic or that powered capacity, trying to push through. So it's a really good one for bench press, for small squatting, jerks, things like this where it's shorter movements, but we want to keep, might be above 1 meter a second, and they keep repeating that movement until it drops off. As soon as they hit a rep that's under a meter a second, boom, set stops, they reset, they get recovered, they go again. It's a really good way for us to test a bit of fatigue as well. So each set, do they get less and less reps? Do they find an extra rep each set? So as a coach, it gives you a little bit more feedback about your athlete. So hopefully you've gotten a lot of practical information out of that. At least 4 ways that you can start utilising the push band and velocity-based training in a very simple environment, that whether it be a team sport, individual programming, or even with your general population clients. As I said, there's a blog that has a really good breakdown of our force velocity curve. So if you want to check that out on the Push website, feel free to click and have a look. But next week, what we're going to start to look at is how we can use the free movement option. Now, for me, this is the most exciting part of a push band because I can start to get into some plyometric work, some med ball work, and really start to quantify what my athletes are doing. So tune in next week and have a little bit of a look.